A group of armed protesters in control of a wildlife refuge in Oregon, well, they say they have no plans to leave. Thanks for joining us on this Monday afternoon. I'm Brent Hunsaker. Natalie has the day off. For the first time since this standoff started, we are expecting to hear information directly from law enforcement. What you were looking at right there was a setup where we're waiting for the sheriff of Harney County, that's Sheriff David Ward, to make a statement. We understand he will not be taking questions from the press. Now, the protesters seized the government complex at this wildlife refuge on Saturday after a march supporting two ranchers convicted of setting fires that got onto federal land. They want a new hearing for Dwight Hammond and his son Steve. Both of them today reported to prison, federal prison in Southern California.
We have a lot of work to be able to unwind the unconstitutional land transactions that have taken place here. Being fenced off.
I need sound. Ammon Bundy accuses the government of forcing ranchers to sell their land to create the wildlife refuge. That's why they've taken over the some 17 buildings that make up the headquarters for this refuge. Now, Bundy believes that people should be able to use public lands for cattle grazing, for mining, and for logging, that they shouldn't be closed off. The FBI is now working, we understand, with investigators to try to end this standoff peacefully. Again, the Harvey County Sheriff's Office in Burns, Oregon is expected at any moment now to give us a statement. We will take that statement live, and as soon as we have that, we'll pass it along to you. The armed protesters, again, you're looking at a live shot. We're waiting for the sheriff to make an appearance in Burns, Oregon. Burns is the county seat. The armed protesters in this have submitted supposedly a redress of grievances to local government and also to law enforcement involving the Hammond case. They basically want the case retried. Now, go back a ways. Originally, they were convicted under a terrorism statute that potentially could have given them the death penalty. The minimum sentence in that was 5 years, but at the time of the original sentencing, the judge said for what they actually did, he couldn't conscience a 5-year prison sentence for the father and the son, so one was sentenced to a year in jail, the other to just a few months. The federal prosecutors appealed that to the federal appeals court, and won from the federal appeals court a reissuing of the sentence, reinstated the minimum federally mandated 5-year sentence under the statute on which they were convicted. Again, they were convicted of basically doing a backburn on their property to try to protect their lands from an out-of-control wildfire. Some of that backburn got onto federal land, but it was controlled by the family. That was the conviction that they were given. But again, while we wait for the sheriff to make an appearance, we'll move on to some other stories, including a story from Scott Hammond. Now, the federal government's land management has long been a contentious issue, and the dispute in eastern Oregon is the latest in a long series of conflict. Here's Scott Logan's report.
Tensions between the federal government, which manages large tracts of land in the West, and ranchers have existed for more than 100 years. Professor John Freemuth is a public lands expert with the Andrus Center for Public Policy at Boise State University.
But the real issue is a lot of the West, especially Idaho, eastern Oregon, is managed by the national or federal government. For what purposes? That's the conflict. Wildlife conservation, clean water, wilderness, ranching, mining, so we fight about that.
Idaho is one of the western states with the most federally managed land, 61%. The nation's 13 western states are home to 93% of federal land, according to the Congressional Research Service. But when people talk about giving management of federal lands to the states, Freemuth says that's easier said than done. The issue is called transfer.
Should some of the federal lands, primarily BLM, probably maybe Forest Service, be transferred to the state to manage? Only Congress can do that, because of the property clause of the U.S. Constitution.
Freemuth thinks it's good that people care so much about public lands. The problem, he says, is when those emotions turn violent. Scott Logan, KBOI 2 News, Boise.